John Daversa Podcast.
The most important things about playing jazz actually cannot be taught because there's no way to quantify a lot of it. So you have to find it yourself. You have to be curious enough and hear it and go after it yourself. And that is what needs to be taught. It's how to be curious. It's how to go after it. That can be taught.
Bob Sheppard, one of the finest saxophone players and studio musicians and musicians in general on the planet. Known Bob for a long time, and he was so gracious to come in here and sit down with me. He was playing a gig with Steely Dan. So this is our talk on music and life with Bob Sheppard. Bob Sheppard, welcome.
John Daversa, thank you for the kind invitation.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. I know you're in town for a moment playing with Steely Dan, and we got to snatch over here for a moment and say hello. We just got to play. I was thinking about it. We just got to play together a few months ago at the Potato. You sat in the big band.
I did. That was scary. Yeah. And every time you come and it's happened where 3 nights, or usually it's
we usually do 4. Yeah,
and it's like, oh man, I wanted. Just was usually not able to work that out for whatever reason, but it was nice to be in the band and try to play your music. It's not an easy thing to sit in on.
Such an honor, Bob, and I'll keep calling.
Thank you.
You know what I was thinking about is I remember, I think this must have been when I first met you, and it was probably mid-90s, something like that. And I was kind of the young whippersnapper, and I don't know what the gig was, but we were playing something together, and there was a rehearsal, and we went over to your house. I don't know if you would have the same house anymore, but it was in like North Hollywood-ish.
Same house.
Yeah.
They're gonna bury me there in my backyard, I'm afraid.
That's amazing. And I don't even remember who we were playing with, but what I remember, it's all fuzzy, but I remember you because your reputation preceded you, and I was going to get to play with Bob Sheppard, and
I'm afraid about that reputation.
And, of course, if it was 1:00, then I was there, I learned from my dad to be there half an hour early, sat in my car, and then I probably knocked on the door 10 minutes early. And you were so chill and so welcoming and made me feel so comfortable.
Oh,
and
thank God.
Yeah. I was always impressed by that because you were, already, for me, a role model, and you treated me with such care and such consideration. And then, we played together, and it was such you were all ears, and I was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. So
wow, that's great.
Thank you for that entrance.
Well, I wish I could say that I do remember a lot of situations with you, but I was telling him that studio that our friend John Pappenbrook built after I bought.
I didn't realize John built it,
and that turned out. I was just telling Joe LaBarbera the other day, who we were playing in my studio. I said, there's certain things in life that are turned out to be like really important things, like just that made your life better, and that was an important thing, is to build that studio. Because, when I first moved to LA, just felt like a very foreign place to me. It was like
from Philadelphia. Did you go directly?
Yeah, actually, I moved to LA from New Orleans. I was teaching. I got this teaching job at Loyola University for 2 years. Right, I did. It was just sort of dropped in my lap in a way. I was going to Eastman. I was getting ready to move to New York. It's where I always expected I was going to end up, and I was saving up money, and I was going to move to New York. And my friends, my classmates at Eastman, I was doing this master's degree up there. A bunch of them were moving to L.A. And I don't know if you remember a guy named John Serry.
I don't. No.
Okay. Well, he turned out to be kind of like a cult hero for his music in Europe. There was this group that moved to L.A. from Eastman with Ron Wagner, Steve Kajawa. What was the name of that group? Oh my God, I can't think of it. But he had a record deal. Say, hey, I want you to come out to L.A. And so I went to do this record. I flew out there and I said, man, you come out here, you'll be doing all kinds of stuff. And he was right. I was just hanging out at his pad, and there was all of a sudden found myself doing these rehearsal bands at Local 47 at the Union, and there was a lot going on, and I just okay, I'll stay, And that
around
that
what
was
year was that when you moved over?
That was fall of 1980.
Oh, okay, right there. Okay, that's when we moved from LA. Was summer of 1980 to Oklahoma.
To Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Wow. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that studio that you came over that day has become like kind of people know about it. They want to. LA is a funny place. You don't feel the energy there. I mean, there's so much going on at any particular moment, but you would never know it. Just as a musician, just new in town. So so that's a place people can play. They know that they can play, and I say, look, you call me anytime. It's we could play. It's soundproof. So that's kept me really in my musical life, my creative life, I would say. Because like playing jazz, you have to do it. You can't just can't once in a while do it. It's a process, and that process is like comes from playing and then figuring out what you don't like so much, or the failure of what you're trying to do when you're playing, and that gives me focus to practice. That's literally how it's always been with me. It's just like, oh man, I sucked on that. How am I going to practice that? How am I going to get better on that? And so for me, not only it's like a way to keep me honest about like where I am musically, but it's the community, of players that need to play, right? And so it really did have this kind of focal point of like-minded musicians that I could relate to, and it made my life in LA great. Because if I was just sort of working and doing the stuff without the creative part, defeating that creative part, I don't know. I probably would have left. Probably would have.
You created your community there to support you.
I really that was part of it, and luckily I met some like-minded people when I first moved to LA that wanted to play. It was like, hey, this is cool. I have some friends now. We could play. We could hang out. We could listen to music. Right? It's not all about like getting the gig and who's doing what. It was like people I could, relate to musically and as friends. Those guys were North Texas guys at the time. Clay Jenkins, Steve Houghton, Bob Bowman, Danny Embry. There was a core bunch of guys I met that we played, and it felt good there, so I stayed. Because it was like LA. I was never west of Harrisburg. I didn't know anything about anything, really.
It is true how you're describing it in LA. There's so much incredible music happening there. And they're in these disparate circles almost because everything's so spread out. And I wouldn't say it's cliquey, but it's just separated by region almost. The way that everybody's able to interact with each other. That's what I always felt. I would always meet this like huge monster of a musician that I'd never met before, and all of their musician friends. And it's like, where have you been hanging out?
It just happened to me. I can't remember the guy's name. It's like it was a saxophone player. I was playing at Sam First, and a saxophone player. He's been to L.A. He's been there for quite some time, and we started talking. Went our paths never crossed, And he does that stuff. And it's like that's the way it is there,
Yeah.
It's you never meet anybody. When there were more clubs in LA, that was the thing,
Right.
I mean, I live right down the street, literally 5-minute walk from where Dante's was, and when I moved to LA, I was lucky enough to meet musicians that say, "Well, this is the best neighborhood for musicians because we all." And you live close to all the jazz clubs. There's all the studio, all the work is like 10 minutes to half an hour at the most away, and so I moved to a good spot. Imagine moving to LA and you happen to get an apartment in the city of industry or something. One of these nondescript places, like oh my God, that's like you wouldn't know what to do. So I was lucky that way. I was a little guidance from my friends.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah, there is that little pocket of kind of Studio City, Sherman Oaks, But and the other thing about LA too that I always find mesmerizing is that with all these incredible, like not just incredible musicians, skill level, creativity, all of that, but also just like bands happening and new music. The music, it's hard to get out of that area. It'll be really important for that community, but it's hard to get the megaphone out of that area as opposed to when you're in New York. I feel like that megaphone is loud no matter what's going on and everybody knows about it. There are a few people that have been able to go out, like Kamasi and Thundercat, and they've been able to transcend that. But I feel like it's more difficult in LA to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because there's not really a center there. I mean, New York is that condensed center of energy, that the eye of God and the jazz world. So, it really, just going to New York, and especially back in the old days, you just run into everybody on the street.
Right, it's the center.
You just would, and everyone. It was just sort of. You felt it. It's LA's there, but you don't feel it. It's kind of a interesting town. So these guys, young guys, come from the Frost School or from wherever they're graduating, and they gravitate to LA, and they call me. They call some guys that they think that I could give some advice about LA because. I've been there a long time, blah, blah, blah. And it's now hard for me to actually tell them I used to have good advice, but now I don't know what to tell them because there's, the landscape is so different, for me. So I wouldn't know what I would be doing, actually. The rehearsal bands at the Union, they're still going every day. At the Union, you could go down there and meet a lot of guys and play some music, but the clubs and where to go to get heard and to sit in, I don't know. I mean, the few places I play, of course, but there used to be a lot more places just to go hang out and sit in and just meet musicians, and
so when you came into town. Who were your mentors in LA at that point? Who were the ones that were really helping you to soar?
I didn't have mentors. That's such like people that were helping me. But I tell you, it's a really good question because you arrive new in a town, you have no idea of who's there except maybe a couple of people from school, and then you just sort of go where the music is, You just go to the clubs and the big band thing in LA has always been like the kind of the core way musicians keep their chops together, and get to know players and who can play. It's an interesting sort of a place that you go to play and have fun, but actually you're meeting a lot of people that hear you play, and that's sort of what happened. I think right away I got into Bill Watrous' band. He moved to L.A. and got his big band, the Refuge West, and so they needed a guy. These kind of questions are actually hard to answer, because like how did that happen? How did you get that gig? How did you do? And I never tried to get any gig, and it's the truth. I'm not saying that with any kind of badge of honor, but I never called anybody. I never called a contractor. I never, solicited anyone for a gig. And I go, well, how did that happen? Well, there was I think what happened is just opportunity to be heard in different situations. And that's the way it happened. There was sort of like this real clear meritocracy that was always around in music, and you didn't realize it maybe, but people were checking you out, and on all levels, right? It was, well, if you're able to play in a section, you pick up the flute or the clarinet, and so you all of a sudden like, and next thing you know, you get a call, hey man, can you do a gig? Somebody heard you that you played with in that band, right? I'm pretty sure that's kind of the way it happened, and every time I tell my students, and every time you play is hugely important, because you never know who's listening to you, right? And that's really, I think, one of my best. Every time, it doesn't matter if you're playing a rehearsal with friends, or you're doing any kind of wedding gig or whatever level of gig that you're playing on. You never know. I did so many weddings and casuals, and it was great, man, because I was able to pay the rent, practice jazz, and all those gigs to me, I always did them my whole life, because to me they were all jazz gigs. I didn't separate. It was a chance to like use my ears and express myself and play some solos and whatever style that just took it for granted. They were all opportunity to practice, really, and practice ear training and practice getting a sound, my equipment working there. It's this, take every gig. That's what our friend Gene Cipriano said. But I could tell you that some of these weddings, you show up, didn't know anybody, and next thing you know, wow, that guy's it's a monster. Yeah. It's a monster. They're all trying to do what we're trying to do, right? It's just a way to make some money to pay the rent, and very important gigs, because they led to that gig. They led to that gig, and
each one is an audition, right? It's an audition for the next gig.
Well put, absolutely, and so it's easy to kind of be in the jazz, kind of like not elitist, but let's say like cognoscenti of I'm hip. I know the jazz players and that music that's what I do, and that's what I want to do. But if you read biographies of any great players, there was a time and place where everybody was trying to just play and figure out how to play, and that was the kind of places that I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia at that time. it was an interesting mixture of really good school systems where we had a great jazz bands and all levels, and we had feeder programs. You know, in elementary school I had lessons, and then and that's just everywhere. But down the street there was a bar that a great saxophone player played every weekend. There was music joints everywhere, right? So it was just alive. So as a kid, a young guy, you could, if I get good enough, right, I could play that place, right? As a stepping stones, you know. It was a big deal to go play the gig at the bar up on Route 1 in Langhorne. You know, to play on that stage was a big deal, you know, to me, you know. And so you worked for that, you know, and that was this sort of terrain, this ecosystem of stuff that you could point to at all levels. That whether, and you show up and oh man, I sucked. Then we go home and practice, get those records. Right, I'm not going to ever let that happen again. And you get those records, and then you go back because you wanted the gig, man. You wanted to do well, you know. So there's that circular. Kind of a system which is hard to get now because there's not all these places for people to play. So people are left by their own assessment of where they are in reality, you know. But those gigs they're really, really sort of defined like where you are, you know.
There are different things to do now, I think. But, you know, I would venture to say, you know, for you, just as an observer, you know, you're someone that can walk into any situation and it gets better. You know, the music gets better because you bring that passion, you bring the integrity of what you're going to do with that music. And you're clearly someone that loves to practice. So you're focused on sound, you're focused on, you know, time and the details, the small things, all of that with your instruments, all these different instruments. You're open to all different kinds of musics. And so that's someone you want to be around. And then, you know, when you're going to take 10 minutes between recording, you're a good hang too. Like all those things go together. So it lifts the whole environment. So that's why you're going to get called. You know, I want to call you because that sounds like fun to get to do that gig with you.
Well, likewise. But it's true. How you are, how you comport yourself and your attitude is very much part of it, you know. And I had to learn though. I really did. I was not always like that. I was sort of like, I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine telling me that, you know, people think you're dark, you know, and and they're probably right. I had sort of a, I don't know, little bit of a thing that I had to work on. Let's just put it that way.
Do you think that was coming from not having that balance we were talking about earlier? You know, doing, you know, so much, let's call it commercial work, and not getting to feed the creativity that you have. And when it's not, you know, balanced, then it's got to manifest in some way.
Well, yeah, possibly. I think on a just very personal level, it sort of woke me up because that was probably stuff I had to work out with a therapist. You know, it's like I grew up. My father was a musician. He was a professional musician back in the 30s. Catskills musician.
Wow.
He never considered himself like a good enough player, but
he plays saxophone
and clarinet, but he would never teach me. He because he didn't know enough. He always talked about sound. He had a good sound, but there was a conflict in the house, and I think my sister was 10 years older than me, so I was kind of a only child, and I think I was really secluded in my room practicing to get away from this sort of angst in the house. Let's put it that way, right? interesting topic in itself, right? So I had this, I wasn't out playing baseball and partying with, right? Too much with normal kids, right? I had my clarinet, right? And that was my friend, and it gave me this, hey, I can do something, you know, I can do something, and I'm good at this. I knew I could play music, you know, and it's a very interesting thing, talking to a lot of players now, and now I'm older, and I'm interested in how things happened, you know, and I think it's kind of common where people were, for whatever reason, you know, you have to spend a lot of time alone to get good. Musician, be a really good musician, a great musician, you have to be alone a lot, and that's not normal.
That's so true.
Right? I could ask you the same question.
Oh, yeah. It's you know, you spend 99% of the time working with the music, and then that 1% of the time where the people see you actually doing it with people. But the rest of it is like just, you know, with the writing and the, you know, the practicing and the conceptualizing, that's all internal.
So it makes sense that maybe you don't really gain those social skills like other people.
Yeah.
Right. It's an antisocial behavior, and then when you get good enough, you have to be out and be social. Right. You're not practicing being social. Right. So, you know, there's a lot of pretty interesting characters along the way. You meet this, what, you know, where it's not. This is fun, kind of just to look at personalities and how people become musicians. It's sort of now what I'm really interested in is how it all happens, and how people get at their music, their artistry. Very, very interesting to me. Like, you know, I really would love to be a fly on the wall and like say, I don't know, 10 great saxophone players that I love, right?
You need to write that book.
There's about 5 or 6 books like that I have in my mind, but I don't have enough discipline to write a book. But this one is going to happen because I've already talked to some people about the idea of practicing. No, have you noticed this? Like, players don't really talk about practicing very much. They never did. Right? They never really did. You know, the thing about practicing is so personal, and it really has to do a lot with like how you do everything else in your life. The kind of detail how you treat other things are kind of expressed in how you treat your music.
Yes.
Right? And the total reflection of your personality. I'm really interested in that. So, you know, when we're a fly on the wall in Chris Potter's practice studio, or Seamus Blake's practice studio, or Kenny Garrett's practice studio, or just saxophone players, you know, that would be really fascinating to me. What do they do when they pick up their horn, right? It's the first thing you do when you pick up your horn is an interesting thing in itself. I've been thinking about that. Like, I'm going to pick up my horn. I'm going to play something. I'm going to practice. Now, do you usually think about it? No. You just start playing it. And the sound and whatever happens most of the time for jazz players, that becomes the next thing they practice. Right? It could be 2 notes, it could be 3 notes. And transferring those notes around is the essence of kind of how I practice, and that you could get really defined about that or not. But it when you think about what it is, you know, we learn all the, you know, the chord scale relationships, and you know, when you're young, okay, you got to learn the grammar. That means the 2 5s and all this stuff, and it's all very important to get basic, you know, foundational stuff, so you have somewhere to start. But ultimately, what is it we're trying to do, right? So we have this music that grew up with, Imagine this, like, guys my age, I got guys like Mike Brecker, and they're a little older than me, Bob Mintzer, Bob Berg, all these guys that were like totally, like, when I heard them, it's like, that these post-train sort of guys, like, and myself and many, many more, right? We're this middle class, white dude from Levittown, Pennsylvania. Here's John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, and that becomes where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. That's wild, very powerful. Defined my life. This black music that happened, and I heard on the radio. It's like so powerful. Dave Lehman, Steve Grossman, right? It's like, these people were like, how did that happen? Right? We weren't really around that culture, but it was at a time and place in America where, this confluence of events, like so many of us were studying music. Studying music is really important. Bobby, you got to learn how to play the clarinet really well because it's good for you, right? And if you and it's good for your brain and substantial. A good person learns how to play music, right? They're not talking about going on the road with Miles or Horace or anything like that. It's just good for you to play music. So that was inculcated in certainly. People like myself, kids like myself, like, well, you just play music. It's good for you. It's something to do. You're in band, and it's really something. But from that, and there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, high school jazz bands that people catapulted out from and went to music school. Not really jazz school at the time, but you studied, got your degree in music education. For me, it was, I was a good clarinet player, and I was quite interested in becoming a classical clarinet player, but that sort of fell apart because my dad got me a saxophone, and that was so. But the music, there's a confluence of stuff that's really interesting when you think about it. I would love to get a whole bunch of cats, sort of like my age, and talk about this stuff because it's really fun. I mean, it's like, how in the world, I remember going to Potsdam University and with my jazz band from Glassboro State, now it's called Rowan, and Manny Album, the great genius arranger, he was coming down and as a guest lecturer.
Oh, I see.
And he took me under his wing, but we went up to Potsdam University to play with their jazz band, right? And I met Gary Smullian up there, and I laugh to Gary because we went to his dorm room, and his entire dorm wall was vinyl. And he had every Phil Woods record, and he was an alto player, but he knew everything, And this guy, we were saturated with this music. We just got the records. We had the jazz band, and then there was school, and you got in school, and then there's these opportunities to play all kinds of, and it was just depending where you were. And if you were near a big city, then there was the best music ever to go see, to go out to hear Art Blakey's band, to go hear Horace's band, to hear Miles Davis' band, to hear Mahavishnu's band, hear Weather Report. It was all happening. And so you're hearing it on the radio. You had your horn in your hand in school. You're kind of, hey man, let's check this out. Sharing the music. So you're saving the money up to go to the record store, and you could only afford 2 or 3 records, and you just lived with those records, right? and you'd hang out and together, and you'd listen to those records together, and then you go play a little, some funk soul band, some joint up in wherever. And I remember playing this place in North Jersey with this soul band I was in called the Zebras, because it was half black and half white. I was doing, in a Latin band, a salsa band in Philly, the rough neighborhoods, doing, weddings at the local VFW or whatever. It was within, even when I was young, there was this kind of circular thing going on where, wow, it's cool to play an instrument. You get a chance to play it. And, I'm in a band. I got a band, and we got a gig. And then you go out and you get your butt kicked and you go, man, I got to practice more. I got to practice. So it was this kind of like this whole thing that was made for this already establishing a musical life that continued, right? Nothing happened. Anything that I did was a product of that. That's it. I would have, I don't know, probably would have been something else. Wow. So what happened to me in LA, it was literally a product of what I did when I was in high school. I was playing in bands when I was in 11th grade, right? And by the time I got to LA, I've done a lot of stuff and played a lot of gigs in New Orleans that were amazingly. I can't even tell you that what an experience that was. It was. It's a good thing I got out of New Orleans, because I probably would have been dead. It was too much fun. So LA was a sort of just a continuation. There was a sort of ecosystem there that was been there. But the one thing I didn't expect was the recording work, the studio work, which I knew existed. And of course, I watched TV and movies all my life, but I didn't go to LA to do that kind of work. But that was a natural step for anybody in LA that was a good player, that could read, play styles, and there was a lot of it. And next thing you know, I could double. Yeah. Right, I was a good clarinet player. I was a pretty good flute player, still trying to be, and I enjoyed doubling, and I really loved that challenge of trying to keep up with the real players, So it just happened, I can't tell you, man. It's like all of a sudden I was, found myself in a section, with like guys like Bob Cooper and Jack Nimitz and Pete Chrisley, been like Lanny Morgan, all of a sudden, and I was like, man, what am I doing here? It was really amazing. Like, I couldn't believe these guys are on records I have at home. Yeah, I know. I know that happened to you. Yeah, of course. You were just like, whoa. Mm-hmm. And then you do these, and you get paid, and next thing you know, you get another call, and so that really was something I didn't expect, and it turned out to be very, very cool, I must say. For the most part, I'm so happy that I got a chance to do that kind of work, because now I have a pension, right? I have that really, as a jazz musician, now I'm really trying to center in on playing creative music, and I had to save my money enough to be a bit jazz musician, but well, it's just a funny thing to talk about these how you get most people. I'm not a famous guy at all, but I've done so many things that people know who I am, that are aware of saxophone players. People that know. Yeah. So So when these questions come up, it's sort of I have to kind of put it together because you know I love the teaching part of my life has always been there, and I absolutely love teaching, and but I teach from I don't have any real pedagogy curriculum that I teach from because I didn't learn that way. I mean, I really did not learn how to play jazz from any kind of, now it's kind of a traditional way of studying this. I studied harmony a little bit at a community college. Great. The guy was taught well. It's great. But all the harmony was like, because I had a piano and I heard a chord and I tried to figure it out. Like, what's that? It's a cool chord. What is that sound, right? It's questioning, you know. I guess curiosity is, musical curiosity is the main thing that I try to, talk about with, and what that curiosity is about many things, you know. And if you're playing an instrument, what are you curious, like how that guy gets their sound? What's he doing? Well, that's interesting. He's got his lip. You know, I learned so much from just watching players play, and then trying to go home and let's say, I'm going to try that. Wonder what that's doing, or ask the question. And hey, man, can I try your setup? You sound great. I'd like to try your horn and your mouthpiece, see what that feels like. Most of the time, sure, man, try it. Right? It's very rare anymore, by the way. And people ask, they don't try each other's stuff. I learned so much that way.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's a good question. There was a sort of a culture of sound and who was playing what even in high school, we all had good sounds. We were saying, oh, yeah, that, Phil plays a Meyer, so I'm going to get a Meyer. It's like and let me try yours, man. It was just sort of normal. I didn't even think about it. But now people are more, protective or not. I think it's a good question. What do you think? I don't think it happens as much as it used to. That's really, I talked to Michael Brecker about this, by the way. This was like quite some time ago, but, I said, man, you used to have like a mouthpiece kind of like I have right now that with a hard reed on it, 6 star, without getting into the, and but then you move to that, and then you move to that. Well, he liked to try equipment, right? And then, well, yeah, I would try, I'd try Bob Malik's mouthpiece. I would try Lawrence Feldman's mouthpiece. And, it was like there was like this kind of a culture about sound and what makes the sound. So for now it's kind of not that prevalent now. People live in their own heads or their own world, and they don't know a lot about what works. They just learn how to play what they have, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, really, as long as it sounds good. But the sharing thing is quite the curiosity. That's what we were talking about, curiosity, and so curiosity will teach you to get to try things and get better. It's like. There's so much about the music that I feel the most important things about playing jazz actually cannot be taught because there's no way to quantify a lot of it. So you have to find it yourself. You have to be curious enough and hear it and go after it yourself. And that is what needs to be taught. It's how to be curious. is how to go after it. Right? That can be taught. But the actual thing that you need is about hearing it and being inspired to go after it, being curious, like, how does that work? Like, and dial down the microscope if you have to, because...
Do you like that process of getting closer and closer and closer into that detail with the microscope?
I think I do. I think I do. I think I like the idea of learning something by your ear, going after, most of what I learned is by listening and then copying. And of course, that's transcription. That's what everybody does. But how you do it can be kind of vague, general. You got the notes. Mm-hmm. But how those notes are being played cannot be taught because it's so it's 20% air, it's 25% lip, it's the tongue is like, up on a 45-degree angle. You can't talk about that stuff, right? It's not really valid unless you find, it's like, I hear something and I'm not quite the same. What are they doing to get that sound? Oh, it's just a little bit of, maybe if I roll out, maybe this, maybe that. You try to experiment, not being locked into what you think is really important.
Yeah, that's got to be some other component that enables curiosity as open-mindedness. Because you have to be open to be able to seek from that curiosity. Otherwise, you're not going to get too far. And I was thinking even, the curiosity of how all the mechanisms work, but also, what a musician's state of mind is so much part of it too. What happened to them 10 minutes, the conversation that they had 10 minutes before they went and played is going to define how they're going to be able to feel into that sound and create that sound.
Mm-hmm. That's true too.
I remember having these long, when I was at USC as a student, as a doctoral student, we'd have these discussions. And I remember one discussion about transcription, and I was pulling my hair out because I was like, what is the point of writing these things out? Because that's just it's like looking at it two-dimensionally.
It's a part of the brain. It's a cool exercise.
Yeah,
I certainly did a little bit of that. But that kind of transcription, I realized it didn't really help me that much. It was fun reading it and trying to get it executed. Right. Of course, it's all good. All practice is good. Mm-hmm. But what really helped me is like when I heard something and then transcribed it by ear, right? And then figured out how to play it exactly like I heard it. Then I had to figure out a lot of other things about what it was. And once you do that, you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. But once you do that on certain things, that just like opens up, there you go. If you figure out how to play that sound on that tune, and because of what you're hearing, then you could play that sound is going to happen. You could play that good stuff on that sound on any tune, on another hundreds of tunes, right? So the idea of like hearing something, being interested in it, figuring it out exactly how it's played, and then transferring it around the horn, of course, is kind of part and parcel of what we need to do, right? And but doing that, I mean, it's really kind of I'm stuck trying to talk about it because this process is so innate and organic to what good jazz players do. All of them. Everybody has done it, whether they know it or not. And that's what we're talking about, is the fact that the greatest players that we know, dead and living, they're part of their practice is always about this, right? It's because at some point in their development is like this apples to apples, like this is what I hear and this is how I sound. And if you're honest and with yourself about getting it. As soon as you start living in your own head about what you think you are, you think you're playing, then,
I see.
then that's not the process, right? And you can't do that all the time. It's like you got to have fun, you got to play. You can't be judging yourself like that. But there's certain elements of getting something that you can't play, or you're trying to, it just in terms of like, I don't know. Have you run into students? And I've run into a lot of actually players that they don't actually know what to do with the ends of notes. Say, an example. Do da, do da da ba, do da. It's just nothing on the note. It doesn't swing, right? Very interesting. This is really wild because this is something. If it doesn't have if the note doesn't swing, if it doesn't have a beauty to it, it doesn't have any life. It's not right. It's just wrong. It's just weird. It's like like communication language. It's like, hey man, hey man, hey man. If you just go, hey man, it's like that computer robot sound. Hey man, cool man, how are you today? Right? No, that's not how we communicate, right? And this language of jazz, the sound of jazz, like do da, no, it's do da, dee ah. It's vocal. It's singing.
Yeah.
Right. We're transferring singing into our sound, into inflections, how we play. So. There's no college course in how to, end notes, can't be taught, right? There's so many things like that, but that's an example of one thing. And it's so crucially important in able to sound good.
Oh, you just did right here. This is the course.
So if you're playing on Count Basie and Frank Sinatra records, there's a thing built into the way the note tapers or not tapers, right? And there's no rules about it. Yeah. There's no rules. Yeah. You can't go on this tempo and there's no rules. That's the kind of thing that is interesting to me because why it's interesting is because when I teach, I have a student come in. It's like, and I hear that it's like, well, okay, I'm going to point this out to you, and I want you to know that this is what you're doing. But then I, as a teacher, have to figure out how to teach that. How do I teach someone to do that? Something that's so natural. But there was a time that I had to learn that. Right? No one taught me how to do it. I learned it. Everybody learned it because they heard it and they replicated it, and then they got that motion to know how to affect the end of the note with a little one I don't know, vibrato, one dip, whatever it is.
It's like a dialect.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be any one way, right? It could be your way. There's not one way, Ella Fitzgerald or Nancy Wilson or, they do it differently, right? And but as a teacher, that's an important thing. You cannot let a student play they're playing all kinds of nice notes, right? Good notes, right? But it sounds like it's not right, right? It's like, no, that's a very important thing. So as a teacher, I'm always trying to figure out the simplest way to distill it. Like I wonder how I did that. What is it? How can I get at that? Try this, and that I love that about teaching because I have to go back to how I learned it and figure out how to communicate it, right? And sometimes I'm successful, sometimes not. But usually the demonstrating thing, and I know that's what you do. It's like you play for them, you know, and then when they cop and then they get it. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. It's just that. Oh, it's just that little thing, right? Yeah. So they're getting it from me, or they're getting it from you. We got it from the records, right? Because we paid attention that closely to what was going on, that detail, that dialing down the microscope on these occasions that are a big light bulb goes on, you know. So I really enjoy that process.
Well, I love that idea, that concept that you know, true mastery is when you can teach it. You know, something even, especially things that you can do intuitively, that come naturally. And then you go back and you figure out a way to express it or convey it, and you understand it even deeper. You know, those things that are just so natural. You know, it always baffles me how that comes back.
Yeah, and how some people are just so, they get it. They just have it. They just get it. They hear it and they do it, right? And other people need, you know, they just need the honesty of a teacher telling them the truth, and that's a big thing too, truth telling, right? And because I'm going to tell you some things you might not like, because. Man, the big lessons I've had were on the bandstand. Some older dude, you know, it's like, man, don't stop it. I remember Joe Romano, you know, telling me I was playing second alto today. I was like, oh, okay, that was, you know, just straight out telling me, you know, or hey man, don't get on the bandstand unless you know the tune, you know. It's sort of hard. It was hardcore, you know, but it stuck.
Yeah. I've had a couple experiences like that I still remember, that I'm so grateful for, because otherwise I wouldn't have known, you know, not to approach something like this, like that, or, you know, whatever it might be. So
yeah, I think it's really important to be honest with yourself and be honest about what you're hearing, and I think students really appreciate that, you know. Sometimes it's hard sometimes because we're living in a world of everybody getting a trophy, but no, you don't learn that way. You have to really tell the truth, and then they could take it or not. That's okay, but you know, but if it's coming from a place of actually caring about your job, and not just sort of like, oh, okay, man, you know, that sounds good, you know, see you later, I'll see you next week, you know. I had a couple of clarinet teachers like that, and it taught me nothing, you know. The one clarinet teacher that really taught me, he was like on every note, you know, and it was like, oh, this is a drag, you know. It was, you know, going from one note to the other. So no, there has to be this connection, you know. You just don't go it's go you know. That kind of teaching, what really helped me, you know.
So about, you know, I want to make sure that I ask you this during our time together. Would you share a little bit about your tenure with Freddie Hubbard? Because that was a good moment there that you were together.
Well, yes, I'm glad to. I think that has a lot of elements to it, like how the hell did I get a chance to play with Freddie Hubbard? You know, I was like this 25, 26-year-old cat in L.A., you know, and that happened because meeting Billy Childs early on. Billy heard me play at the what was that little club in Venice? The Come Back In.
Oh.
I was playing with somebody, he heard me, like Billy, he introduced himself, and then I started playing with Billy, his music, and around town, and but he was playing with Freddie at that time. So there was a gig at the Parisian Room. Was that around when you were?
No, but I know of it. Yeah.
Well, it was a venerable club that had jazz for a long time, and it was one of those clubs. It was a black club that down on La Brea and down off of near Venice or something like that, and they had comedians warm up for the jazz acts, and Billy said, Freddie's kind of bugged with the tenor player. You should come down and sit in. Really? Freddie Hubbard, really? So I did, and I sat in. I can't remember exactly what I played. I played a couple tunes, and scared to death. And a couple weeks later, I get a call from his manager or something. You want to do a gig with Freddie? So I guess he hired me. It was never like, hey, we're going to hire you for Freddie's band, And so that started I played with Freddie for about 7 or 8 years, off and on. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a steady gig. He had an East Coast band. He would pick up bands wherever. But a lot of gigs over the years. So there was my university training there. I learned more from doing that than anything.
I used to hear you all play at Birdland West when I was there, down in Long Beach, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So playing with Freddie was terrifying, exhilarating. It was literally a combination of sheer terror, and sheer exhilaration. It's a weird combination of to get on stage with Freddie, because you were dealing not only with truly like one of the greatest jazz trumpet players, a hero. I had every Freddie Hubbard record just about, and all of a sudden, there I was on stage with Freddie Hubbard, the guy on all these records.
It's
and
real.
What am I? You're playing. Guy played with Wayne Shorter. Guy played with every great tenor player I love, and I'm on stage with him. So you can imagine, like I know you can imagine, because these giants they're heroes.
Yeah.
They're literally heroes that we've lived with their music. We have this kind of perceptions of them based on the music, and there's a lot of internal stuff about like getting a gig like that where you find yourself, you could play, you're good, but you never expect to be juxtaposed with a guy like Freddie Hubbard. It was quite a lot of like what am I doing here? What the hell am I doing here, right?
He must have sensed that in you too. I wonder if he...
I kind of try to hide that, but I think everybody played with Freddie had a little bit of that going on, So there was always a trepidatious, a little fearful to get on stage with Freddie. On the other hand, it was like, man, I'm gonna do this, right? And I want to make him like me. I want to do the job so he'll call me back, because this is fun. This is, this is up there. This is like something that you never thought was possible, and so it was quite a interesting thing looking back on it, like having to never know what he was going to play. By the way, he would come roaring in like, 10, 15, half an hour late to the gig, right? Everyone's waiting around for Freddie to show up. He'd rip his horn out of the case, go from rip up to a high C, and let's go, fellas. And you'd hit the stage, right? And you had an idea of like the tunes he was going to call. Mm-hmm. So, it could be 3 or 4 different tunes he might start off with, But the thing that about Freddie you never knew was which Freddie was going to show up that night. Then that was maybe the hardest part of it, because he could be terrifying, like not really, he was a guy with extreme personalities. Let's put it that way, So everybody that did the gig knew that, right? We all read, oh, am I going to be the one tonight that he's going to, be hard on, But all I could tell you is it was like you're just sort of thrown into the jazz, everything that you know about jazz, what you've learned, and it's all on exposed right there, right? So imagine having to play on a tune and you don't know the tune. That happens quite often. He would just start playing, right? And the piano player, could be Bees, could be Childs, could be a bunch of different people. Was he playing? Oh, yeah. And that, ear training test, right? Maximum, and I'm like, I don't know. And I'm trying to be off to the side, just sort of like play a few notes, like to get the idea of where the tonal centers are going, So then when you actually have to play the tune, you have an idea maybe where it's going, You probably heard the tune in your back of your recesses, Sure. Everything was everything about your musical instincts were challenged with Freddie. You never could depend on anything being the same, and including the person that you're dealing with, and it was quite something. Everybody that had a lot of people play with Freddie, and they all have their stories, and but there was some. I was able. I think the reason I was able to play so many years because a lot of people play with Freddie, but he kept calling me back because I think he trusted that I was going to be there when he needed me there. There's something like no one ever taught me. It's how to read the musician, right? So I could sort of see, I was just waiting. I was right there, when okay, take it out, it's going to end some ending, okay, make some stuff up, right? I was, you just have to be, doing this kind of intense musical training that you've had along the way all came to fruition on stage with Freddie. Of instinct, being able to just sort of like, just even perception of knowing what you're doing and having a good time when you're terrified. Another thing that I had to learn, right? If I was up there going, but I was terrified and not sure what was going to happen, but I was like saying, "Oh, okay, I'm having a good time. I'm there for you, man. I'm part of the show. I think that was part of it. A lot of elements to that gig that wasn't. It's not. Nothing's always about the playing. A gig is not. There's a lot of other factors, right? About doing it.
It's so holistic. Everything goes to, and it all feeds into the music itself.
Yeah.
I remember, he knew my dad a little bit. So it was at the Monterey Jazz Festival. And he was, just to say, I got to experience that really sweet side of him. And I was 16 or 17. And I was backstage. Nobody was on the backstage. And I heard in the back, say, "Hey, JD." And I was like, "Who is that?" And it was Freddie Hubbard. And he came and he talked to me, and he was so genuine, so sweet, and so sincere.
Beautiful. Oh, he could be so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
and that
Freddie.
part is in the music.
I loved him
when you hear him play.
Because that part of Freddie was so cool.
Yeah.
And in those rare moments where, we'd be on a bus or I don't know, having a beer or something, where he was just a regular Freddie Hubbard, not the star Freddie Hubbard, but the regular dude, musician, and talking about, Freddie, like, what was it, man, when you were, what was it like, what did you and Train practice together, right? Yeah, man. Yeah, I used to go over Train, and then I'd go over to Sonny Rollins' place, and we'd play together, right? And he's just talking about those. That was amazing to hear. Like, imagine it was like this. Your days were just full of like just playing together. Like going to the club, playing. It was a full-time job with a life, and then the hanging. See, that the hanging part of it is that part of the jazz culture, but very much part of how the music happened as well. It's very different now. Good or bad, it was like he was this bigger than life person, and to play like Freddie Hubbard is an interesting question. It's like you have to have, like SEAL Team 6 mentality about getting on stage, right? You cannot do that. You cannot play like that unless that internal core. That's that. Imagine that. I'm going to show everybody that I'm the baddest mofo on the trumpet. And that was I think that was his driving thing always, right? And that means I got to show it my personality. That his personality was his personality with his playing. It was the same. Extremes, right? I think that's. And then somebody else, another trumpet player, I never knew Kenny Durham, what kind of a guy he was. Really different kind of player, right? Mm-hmm. He was more introspective. I wonder if his personality was more like that, Probably was. But Freddie was basically a sideman. I figured out he was just like us, or like, well, I shouldn't include you in this because you're not a sideman. But the idea of a sideman mentality of like it's a journeyman, but on this high level, because like he was on my favorite records. At some point he had this. Leader. He could have been a leader and have his own band, but he just picked up his bands. He never rehearsed, right? He never treated himself as a leader. His band as Freddie Hubbard band, like Chick Corea would do, or whatever. He just thought he would get the gig and get a band and do the hit and next. Right. And so he didn't have that focus he had the focus as a trumpet player, be able to play with Art Blakey, all be our jazz hero, but to have his own band and to focus on that, I think that was it was just easier for him to be a sideman, kind of like just have a band, get a gig, and get through the gig and go on to the next gig. Interesting in itself, but man, I tell you, this cat playing with Freddie Hubbard was I remember Tokyo, the Blue Note in Tokyo, where he played good 15 choruses on up-tempo, bird-like or something. And it was just kept going and going, never relented, and never repeated a lick. It was kind of like a tour de force. And Billy was there that night, and we just, it's like, he was playing, it was like everything, his life depended on it. But so when he played, it was like that.
Yeah.
It's like, it was all on the line.
Yeah.
And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how the nature of like the commitment of playing your horn and what it meant. That was everything. He was his trumpet. Freddie was his trumpet.
Yeah.
So when he couldn't play anymore, that was so tragic, But anyway, there's a lot. Freddie that was my biggest teacher. I did a lot of cool gigs, man. Again, I don't know how I did any of them, but just being in the right place at the right time, I guess, But that was something I can't believe I did. I just can't believe I was part of that. That experience was very, very. It really defined a lot of things about going forward, because, if I moved to New York, good possibility I would have just, probably been a Broadway pit musician, because I could do that. I like to do that. I did time. Right? That was steady gig, paid well, and I would probably be doing jazz gigs like a lot of our friends that do that kind of thing. Right? You're pursuing music, but you have a baseline of income, right? But moving to LA, I think that would have never happened in New York, man. There's a great tenor player on every block, but in LA, at that time, there wasn't a lot of tenor players that kind of had, like this kind of East Coast post-train kind of thing, right? And and Billy Childs, so that was because of LA, I was able to play with Freddie Hubbard. So that's pretty cool.
That's very, very cool. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. That was it.
That'll work. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, my
Beautiful,
friend.
beautiful.
Much gratitude, everyone, for checking out the podcast. Please just subscribe and follow and like and add a comment, as it really helps us expand and grow and keep us all connected together. So I appreciate it very much, and I send you much, much, much love. I'll see you on the next one.